With these next few videos, we're going to look at polynomial addition and subtraction, and we have them written in a horizontal format. So I'm going to look at this first one here, part A, and what I'm looking at is all of my like terms. Since I'm adding, I can look at the coefficients and the bases of k to the fourth power. So negative 4k to the fourth plus a negative 3k to the fourth would be negative 7k to the fourth. I'm looking here and I've got a constant which is a positive 14 and a constant which is a negative 8. So when I add those together, I'm going to get a positive 6. And then finally I have a positive 3k squared and a negative 14k squared. So a positive 3 and a negative 14 would be a negative 11k squared. Now what we would like to have is the exponents decreasing in a descending format. So I'm going to write the 7k to the fourth, the negative 11k squared, and the positive 6. And that would be in descending order of exponents. Let's look at part B. Again, I'm looking at adding. So I want to look at r to the third, r to the third. So I'm looking at the coefficients. So 9 plus a negative 2 would be 7 r to the third. And next I want to look at, are there any other r squares? And they're right here, and I want to include the sign. So a positive 5r squared and a negative 8r squared is going to be negative 3r squared. And here I've got a positive 11r and a positive 9r, and that's going to be a positive 20r. Notice there's no more constants in this problem, so our final answer would be 7r to the third minus 3r squared plus 20r, and that would be the simplified format. And then finally, part C, I'm looking, I see p to the fourth, p to the second, p to the fifth, p to the fifth, p to the second, and a constant. So I am subtracting in this case, so I'm going to have 14p to the fourth plus 11p squared minus 9p to the fifth. Subtract a negative becomes a positive 14. Subtract a positive, I get negative 5p to the fifth. And again, another subtract a negative, and I'm going to get a positive 11p squared. So I'm looking for my powers of 5 here, and I have negative 9p to the fifth and negative 5p to the fifth. So that's going to give me negative 14p to the fifth power. Now what's next? I have a squared term here, a constant, a squared term to the fourth. So since there's no more p to the fourth, I'll get to write positive 14p to the fourth. And then I have p to the second, which would be this one and this one, and they're both positive. So that would give you 22p to the second, and this would be the only constant, plus 14. So descending order 5, 4, 2, there's our result for adding. For part A here, I see fifths to the fifth power, and to the fifth power, so I'm going to get 3v to the fifth plus 8v to the third minus 10v to the second, and when I subtract a negative, I get to say it's a positive 12v to the fifth. Subtract a positive would be negative 4v v to the third and subtract a positive, I get negative 14v to the second. So my v to the fifth power is 1 right there and 1 right there. So that would be 15v to the fifth. I don't see any v to the fourth, but I do see v to the third, and that would be 8v to the third, and negative v to the fourth would be positive 4v to the third. And then I see squared, and that would be negative 10, and negative 14, which would be negative 24r to the second power. Skipping along, I'm going to look at polynomial multiplication. So 4p minus 1 to the second power is really 4p minus 1 times 4p minus 1. And this could be written in a area model as well. And there's 4p, and there's minus 1, and there's 4p, and there's minus 1. So when I multiply 4p times 4p, I get 16p squared. 4p times a negative 1, I get a negative 4p. Negative 1 times 4p, I get another negative 4p, and negative times negative is a positive. So 16p squared minus 8p plus 1 would be the trinomial version of when we multiply these two expressions out together. So if you like the area model, that would be 4p times 4p, which would be 16p squared. 4p times negative 1 is negative 4p. 4p times negative 1 would be negative 4p, and negative 1 times negative 1 would be 1. So you see the four terms show up here as well. Next problem, looking at B. If I make my area model, I'm going to have 3x minus 4 and 4x plus 3. So what's 3x times 4x? That's going to give you 12x squared. What's negative 4 times 4x? It'll be negative 16x. What's 3x times 3 would be 9x. And what's negative 4 times 3 would be negative 12. So again, if I was multiplying this out, I'd say the first two terms, that would give me 12x squared. 3x times 3 would be 9x. Negative 4 times 4 is negative 16x. And negative 4 times positive 3 is a negative 12. We should see all those values here as well. So combine that, and I get 12x squared minus 7x minus 12. Let's look at part B on this one. So if this is 2n and 2, this would be 6n and 1. What's 6n times 2n? That would be 12n squared. What's 2 times 6n? Be 12n. What's 2n times 1? Be 2n. And what's 2 times 1? Which would be 2. So if I multiply this out, I'm going to get 12n squared plus 2n plus 12n plus 2. So I get 12n squared plus 14n plus 2. All right, with the polynomial division, it's very similar to long division in 1,280 divided by 4. Well, you would divide 4 into 1,280 like we would do the long division. And we're going to do the same thing, except my divisor is n minus 2. And my dividend is 6n squared minus 4n minus 16. So really you're asking the n will divide 6n squared 6n times. What's 6n times n? Well, it's 6n squared. What's 6n times a negative 2? That would be a negative 12n. Now, when you go to subtract, you are subtracting 6, that goes to 0, but you're also subtracting a negative. So what's negative 4? Subtract a negative 12, that'd be negative 4 plus 12, would be 8n. And n times what gets me 8n? So if I go with 8, I'm going to get 8n minus 16. And then now I want to subtract 8n minus n goes to 0. What's negative 12? Subtract negative 16. That would be negative 12 plus 16, or 4. So your result is 6n plus 8, 4 divided by n plus 2. And we'll look at part C. And I've got n minus 5. And I've got n to the third minus 12n squared plus 34n plus 5. So n will divide n cubed n to the second time. N to the second times n is n to the third. What's n to the second times negative 5? Be negative 5n squared. Now we're going to subtract. So what's negative 12? Subtract negative 5. That's going to be negative 12 plus 5, or a negative 7n squared. So n times what would get me negative 7n squared? So negative 7n times n would be negative 7n squared. Negative 7n times a negative 5 would be a positive 35. Now what happens when you subtract that? That changes the sign of everything. So that goes to 0, and what do you get? 34 minus, you get negative 1. N. And then you have to deal with, let's bring down the 5. So that would be negative 1, negative 1n. Negative 1 times negative 5 is positive 5. And when you subtract those, they go to the different signs, and they divide out. So how many times will n minus 5 divide this entire population? It's n squared plus 7n equals 1.